Russia's War in Ukraine by Helen Regan, CNN. What we're covering. Ukraine has requested a meeting of the UN Security Council on Tuesday to discuss the Russian strike on a shopping mall that killed at least 15 people. The attack in Kremenchuk, central Ukraine, sparked international outrage. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called it one of the most defiant terrorist acts in European history. Russian President Vladimir Putin will travel to Tajikistan on Tuesday, his first international trip since the invasion of Ukraine began in February. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said there can be no return to how ties were with Russia were before the war in Ukraine. Russian efforts in Donetsk focus on settlements around Sloviansk, from CNN's Team Lister. In another area where Russian forces are trying to take territory north of the city of Sloviansk in the Donetsk region, the General Staff of the Ukrainian military said Russian efforts are focused on the settlements of Donetsk and Dolina. It fired at the positions of our troops with artillery and MLRS, multiple launch rocket system, conducted area reconnaissance with UAVs, unnamed area vehicle. The General Staff said. It added that our defenders stopped the enemy's attempt to advance. Elsewhere, Russian attacks took the form of artillery and mortar fire, with little movement on the ground. A Ukrainian demeanor examines a crater caused by missile strikes that struck the yard of a school in a residential area of Kharkiv, Ukraine on June 27th. Sergei Bubok. Kharkiv, the General Staff said, the north of Kharkiv, the Russians continue to use artillery to prevent Ukrainian forces from advancing to the Russia-Ukraine border. An attempt by Russian troops to cross the Siversky Donetsk River in the south of Kharkiv region had been repelled. Sumy. The General Staff also said there had been more cross-border shelling into the northeastern Sumy region without providing details of casualties or damage. Heavy fighting near Lysychansk as Russian forces seek to encircle key city, Ukrainian officials say, from CNN's Team Lister. Scores of Ukrainian evacuees from the embattled city of Lysychansk board an evacuation train to safer cities to the west, from the train station in Pokrovsk, Ukraine, on June 24th, by Scott Peterson. The Ukrainian military said its forces have held back Russian assaults in several areas along the front lines in Luhansk and Donetsk regions, while fighting continues around the city of Lysychansk. Sergei Gaidai, head of Luhansk region military administration, said the Russians were attacking Lysychansk from the southern and southwestern directions. Fighting is underway between Vovchayivka and the oil refinery. They are trying to block the city from this side and take control over the transport connection with Donetsk region, he said Tuesday. Some context. The Ukrainian military has said the area around Vovchayivka, adjacent to the main highway, is the focus of current battles. Were the Ukrainians to lose this area, Lysychansk would be virtually surrounded. Russian advance held back. The Ukrainian General Staff said Tuesday that Russian efforts to reach the highway in an area where Luhansk and Donetsk regions meet had been thwarted. Ukrainian soldiers successfully suppressed all these attempts and forced the enemy to retreat. The general staff said. Lysychansk destruction. Gaidai said there had been widespread destruction in Lysychansk due to Russian shelling on Monday and confirmed that 8 people were killed in a rocket strike while queuing at a water tank. There was a lot of damage to high-rise buildings and private houses on June 27th, he said. Some areas of the city were shelled several times. Bakhmut. There was also heavy shelling by Russian forces trying to advance toward the town of Bakhmut, a key position for Ukrainian defenses some 50 kilometers, 30 miles southwest of Lysychansk. Biden officials privately doubt that Ukraine can win back all of its territory. From CNN's Natasha Bertrand, White House officials are losing confidence that Ukraine will ever be able to take back all of the land it has lost to Russia over the past 4 months of war. U.S. officials told CNN, even with the heavier and more sophisticated weaponry the U.S. and its allies plan to send. Advisors to U.S. President Joe Biden have begun debating internally how and whether Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky should shift his definition of a Ukrainian victory, adjusting for the possibility that his country has shrunk irreversibly. U.S. officials emphasized to CNN that this more pessimistic assessment does not mean the U.S. plans to pressure Ukraine into making any former territorial concessions to Russia in order to end the war. There is also hope that Ukrainian forces will be able to take back significant chunks of territory in a likely counter-offensive later this year. And not everyone in the administration is as worried. Some believe Ukrainian forces could again defy expectations, as they did in the early days of the war, when they repelled a Russian advance on the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. And here we're gonna read about the full story by Natasha Bertrand, CNN. The title is Biden officials privately doubt that Ukraine can win back all of its territory. White House officials are losing confidence that Ukraine will ever be able to take back all of the land. It's exactly the same from the last article I just read. So, a congressional aide familiar with the deliberations told CNN that a smaller Ukrainian state is not inevitable. Whether Ukraine can take back these territories is in large part, if not entirely, a function of how much support we give them. The aide said. He noted that Ukraine has formally asked the U.S. for a minimum of 48 multiple launch rocket systems, but to date has only been promised 8 from the Pentagon. And not everyone in the administration is as worried. Some believe Ukrainian forces could again defy expectations, as they did in the early days of the war when they repelled a Russian advance on the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has remained highly engaged with his Ukrainian counterparts and spent hours on the phone last week discussing Ukrainian efforts to recapture territory with Ukraine's defense chief and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff again, Mark Milley. Officials familiar with pessimism comes as Biden is meeting with U.S. allies in Europe, where he will try to convey strength and optimism about the trajectory of the war as he rallies leaders to stay committed to arming and supporting Ukraine amid the brutal fight. We have to stay together. Putin has been counting on from the beginning that somehow NATO and the G7 would splinter, but we haven't, and we're not going to. Biden said Sunday while at the G7 summit in the Bavarian Alps. Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz, US President Joe Biden, Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, European Council President Charles Michel, Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and France's President Emmanuel Macron have taken seats at a round table as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky addresses G7 leaders via a video link during their working session on Monday, June 27, 2022, at Elmau Castle, southern Germany. The administration announced another $450 million in security assistance to Ukraine last week, including additional rocket launch systems, artillery ammunition, and patrol boats. The U.S. is also expected to announce as soon as this week that it has purchased an advanced surface-to-air missile defense system called the NASAMS for Ukrainian forces. Biden indicated in an op-ed earlier this month that he is committed to helping Ukraine gain the upper hand on the battlefield so that it has leverage in negotiations with Russia. The mood has shifted over the last several weeks, though, as Ukraine has struggled to repel Russia's advances in the Donbas and has suffered staggering troop losses, reaching as many as 100 soldiers per day. Ukrainian forces are also burning through their equipment and ammunition faster than the West can provide and train them on new NATO standard weapons systems. A U.S. military official and a source familiar with Western intelligence agreed it was unlikely that Ukraine will be able to mass the force necessary to reclaim or of the territory lost to Russia during the fighting, especially this year, as Zelensky said on Monday was his goal. A substantial counteroffensive might be possible with more weapons and training, the sources said. But Russia may also have an opportunity to replenish its force in that time, so there are no guarantees. Much hinges on whether Ukraine can retake territory at least to February 23rd lines, said Michael Kaufman, a Russian military expert at the Center for Naval Analysis. The prospect is there, but it's contingent. If Ukraine can get that far, then it can likely take the rest, but if it can't, then it may have to consider how best to attain victory. Russian forces gaining ground. Russian forces now control more than half of the eastern Ukrainian region of Donetsk. Pavlo Kirilenko, the head of the Donetsk region military administration, said Thursday. Ukrainian forces retreated from the key eastern city of Severodonetsk on Friday after weeks of bloody battle. Russian forces last week also captured ground around Lysychansk, the last city in the eastern Luhansk region still controlled by Ukraine. Ukrainian military commanders are now grappling with the reality that they may have to withdraw from the area to defend territory further west. In the meantime, Russian oil revenues have only been going up as oil prices have skyrocketed, even amid the harsh sanctions imposed by the West. U.S. officials said on Monday that the U.S. and its allies are going to try capping the price of oil so Russia does not profit from it anymore. But how and when that cap will take effect remains to be seen. Internally, there is a sense among some in the Biden administration that Zelensky will need to start moderating expectations for what Ukrainian forces can realistically achieve. Zelensky said late last month that he would consider it a victory for our state as of today to advance to the February 24th line without an unnecessary losses. He reiterated that goal last week. We don't have any other choice left but to move forward, move to liberate all of our territories. He said in a Telegram post, we need to kick the invaders out of the Ukrainian regions, though the width of the front lines is as long as over 25,000 kilometers. We feel that we hold the strategic initiative. And on Monday, he put a timeline on it. He wants the war over and for Ukraine to win by the end of 2022. He told G7 leaders. Russia is suffering acute combat losses as well, losing as much as a third of its ground force in 4 months of war, U.S. intelligence officials estimate. Officials have also said publicly that Russia will struggle to make any serious gains further west, using the Donbas region as a staging ground, without a full mobilization of its reserve forces. But Russia believes it can maintain the fight, wearing down Ukrainian and Western reserve as the global economic effects of the war become more severe, officials have told CNN. The hunt for Soviet-era weaponry. As CNN has previously reported, Russia is looking in particular to exploit the gap between how much Soviet-style ammunition Ukraine and its allies have in their stockpiles, and how long it will take the West to provide Ukraine with modern, NATO standard weapons and munitions that require time-consuming training. A senior defense official acknowledged to CNN that the Soviet-era stocks are dwindling, but haven't yet reached rock bottom. The official said that some Eastern European countries still have more they could provide, but only if they continue to be backfilled by allies with more modern equipment. The US and its allies, meanwhile, have been scrounging the world for the kind of Soviet-era ammunition that fits the equipment Ukraine already has, including 152 millimeters artillery ammunition. NATO standard weapons fire larger, 155 millimeter rounds. But another U.S. defense official told CNN that effort is effectively reaching its end, with almost everything available that countries are willing to provide having already gone in. Given the prodigious rate at which the Ukrainians have gone through their order ammunition and the bruising artillery fight in the Donbas, the official said, Soviet-era weapons are being wiped off the earth. CNN's Katy Bo Lysychansk contributed to this report.